slots for memory. There's a LGA 1366 socket. This is a fairly newer motherboard. It has also the X58 chipset, which is your north. It's not the north. Well, it's the north bridge, but it's not the memory control anymore, because this would be the new Core i7. The memory controller now is on the CPU, which really speeds things up. All hardware components, either on or off the motherboard, all have to communicate with the CPU. So everything that you see here will communicate with the CPU, and also anything connected to it as a peripheral. Some of the ports that we have on our computer. Here we start off with some external SATA for external hard drives. 3 gigabits per second. That's been moved up to 6 gigabits per second. Have quite a few USB 2 ports here. USB is now at 3.0, which is considerably faster. Might have a FireWire port, also gigabit LAN connection. Your audio also might have an optical audio port. This is the motherboard ports that are common I/O devices that you'll find. CPU and chipsets. Now the CPU performs the data processing. All the processes, the instructions and software are all processed through the CPU. The chipsets, these are small microchips on the motherboard. They control the data flow. Chipsets and the CPU are pretty important to understand and what they're connected to, because your performance of your computer is based on your CPU, your chipsets, your memory, and your video card. We're going to discuss that more. Manufacturers of the CPU and chipsets. We have Intel, which is the major corporation for manufacturing of all CPUs. They have about 80% of the market. AMD probably has about 10%, and the rest comprise of maybe 5 to 10%. We have AMD, VIA, SIS, and Citrix. Here's an example of a gigabyte motherboard. We have the Intel 45 Express chipset again. This would be your north bridge. Your south bridge would be down here. This would be your I/O controller. Now the north bridge is going to control your memory. So your memory slots are here right next to it. Also you have a PCI Express slot here for your video card. So your CPU, your video card, and your memory are all going to be the data flow is all going to be controlled by this north bridge. The south bridge down here is going to control everything else. All your PCI slots, all your hard drive or your SATA slots, any other USB slots or anything else connected to this motherboard will be controlled. The data flow will be controlled by this controller here, the I/O. Motherboards uses 2 chips in its chipset, the north bridge and the south bridge. Now here's a little diagram that I'm going to ask you to draw, because I really want you to understand it. We have the CPU sitting on the top. We have the north bridge, which is controlling all the data flow to the CPU. And primarily we're going to be moving RAM information back and forth from the CPU. The RAM is going to be our primary memory storage for the CPU, holding instructions, holding data, and we're going to be moving data back and forth between these devices. Also video. If we're running games or any kind of high definition or high resolution graphics, we need a strong or fast video card, because we don't want any bottlenecks. Anything that's going to be slowing this computer down will become a bottleneck, so we need a fast video card and fast RAM. Now all our other devices are going to be connected through our south bridge, such as your keyboard, your mouse, your hard drive. All the other components that are considerably slower will be connected to your south bridge. But they're not going to normally be a bottleneck to your computer, because your computer performance is based on your CPU, your RAM, and your video card. Primary storage, which is also considered temporary storage. This is your RAM, and it's used primarily by the processor. The processor will be moving information, data, instructions in and out of the RAM very, very quickly. Secondary storage. This is what we call permanent storage. This will be your hard drive, your CD, floppy drive, external drives, anything that can store data on a permanent basis. Here's an example of a DIMM chip. This is RAM memory. It's a temporary place to hold instructions and data while the CPU processes. You see there's a little slot here. The DIMMs, we have primarily DIMM 2 and DIMM 3 today, or DDR2 and DDR3. And this little slot is in a position so that when you plug this RAM into the slot of the motherboard, you won't be able to put it in unless the slot lines up. Primary storage, RAM, random access memory, temporary storage on the motherboard. When the power goes down on the computer, this memory goes away. Types of RAM. Memory modules. We've got the DIMMs, and we still have RAM bus, which is providing another type of memory, inline memory module. Don't see it as often. The DIMMs are pretty much taking over the market now. RAM is volatile. That term volatile, meaning it doesn't persist or it can go away when the power is removed. Data does not persist. The ROM, the read-only memory. This is read-only memory, and it is non-volatile. When the computer first starts up, it needs some instructions in order to start. We have read-only memory, a BIOS chip, that holds the startup instructions. We need that. Here's an example of some DIMM slots on the motherboard. This would be a 2-channel memory. We could put DIMMs in either of these, or all 4 of them could be populated. Dual channel is much faster than single channel, and it helps to increase the performance of the computer considerably. Secondary storage, hard drives, disks that rotate at high speeds. This is a pretty antiquated technology for today's digital computer. There are devices now, hard drives, that are totally digital, that pretty much have what's called RAM or flash memory in them. So they are completely digital, no moving parts, and much faster. And the reliability is much higher. When you're rotating disks inside of an enclosed space at high speeds, they heat up, they wear out, the bearings start to degrade, and your disks today probably last 5 years at the max. I've seen disks die within a few weeks after being purchased. Integrated drive electronics, the IDE. This is an older technology that was used primarily with the hard drives. It's been replaced. This ATA is the attachment standard, specifies the motherboard hard drive interface. Now the types of the ATA, you have the serial, which is the newer type, and it's pretty much replaced the parallel. Much faster than the parallel. The SATA, only one device per port. Where the parallel, you could actually have 2 devices per port. But again, the SATA, the speeds have increased considerably over the parallel. Here's a drive that has its case removed. If you notice here, there's quite a few platters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Looks like 6 platters. Today, most drives might have either 1 or 2 platters. This would be an old